Ever since the first chapter of Deltarune, the community has been curious about Susie, with her being shrouded in numerous mysteries, and even after chapter 2 released, we barely got any information about her other than her love for chalk, since she rarely talks about herself and her personal life. We don't know where she lives, we never see her parents. Heck, she doesn't even call them when she's sleeping over at what's essentially a stranger's house, since she's never been inside before based on her reactions. And meanwhile, every other monster is based on something, such as the dreamers being similar to goats, sands to skeletons, and birdly to birds. We don't even know what kind of monster she's supposed to be, or at least we didn't, until chapters 3 and 4 released, giving us interesting information. Let's start with the obvious and describe her physical traits. Her eyes have a yellow-orange shade to them, reminiscing of most reptiles' eyes, and dragon designs in the media. She has an elongated face with a reptile-like snout and nostrils. She has sharp yellow teeth, similar to crocodiles and fairy tale depictions of dragons. She also has the most HP out of the team, making her very resilient, probably due to tough skin or scales. Her voice is very deep, judging by her grunt and laugh, and definitely has the ability to roar if she wanted to. And finally, her tail, which she definitely doesn't have and only appears in Noelle's dream. There's also this obsession she has of becoming Susie Zilla and bringing destruction over the world for fun, which in addition to her behavior in chapter 1 and her constantly being referred to as the Beast, shows us the destructive side she has, adding more to the dragon stereotype of destruction and chaos. Finally, after beating Gerson, chapter 4's secret boss, she asks him which Dragon Blazer character she's supposed to be, and he tells her that she's the dragon. And we know that Dragon Blazers is just a retold version of the prophecy, implying that she's the dragon and not the girl. But that's the subject for a future theory. All of this information scattered throughout the 4 chapters allows us to confidently say that Susie is a dragon. That's it, theory over, goodbye. The video is still not over, and that's because most people overlook this little detail. If you manage to find the man behind the tree of chapter 3 by completing the gruesomely complicated steps to reach it and talk with the man, he tells you this: the earth was covered in water. Dinosaurs appeared, an ice age. Actually, there are still dinosaurs. Is this still mixed up? Okay, look, this is where my theory lags a bit, but in a world filled with monsters, souls, and dark worlds, dragons and dinosaurs being the same thing isn't that far-fetched, okay? Okay, let's continue. This implies that pure-blooded dinosaurs/dragons aren't here anymore, and so Susie is only half dragon, with no way of knowing the second half. Or at least we didn't know until this specific scene. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this theory so far, please consider subscribing and dropping a like. This is the first video of this channel, with way more Undertale and Deltarune videos planned, either long form or shorts for those of you with no attention spans. Let's go back to the theory. After beating the Titan, Susie wants to thank the old man one last time, but instead of fighting him, she finds something horrible. Something so horrible she decides to break it with her own fist, injuring herself and even bleeding. As we know from Undertale, monsters don't bleed since they are made out of magic, and just turn to dust if they're critically wounded. You might tell me, maybe Deltarune monsters are different since they live on the surface and are incapable of using magic, which could be an explanation if it wasn't for this one little rabbit in town. When Chris interacts with them in chapter 1, they say, "Does it hurt to be made out of blood?" Implying that monsters aren't made out of blood, and instead having a completely different anatomy. So, we're left wondering, why does Susie bleed? The answer is, she's half human. Not only does she bleed, a trait only humans have, but she's also very determined to achieve her goals, being convinced she can change the prophecy, fighting the old man over and over until she cuts his hair, and even managing to get back up on her feet after getting swooned by the knight out of pure spite for them, kind of like how Frisk manages to thank a death laser from a literal god because they're determined to save everyone. In addition, there are multiple instances where Susie chooses not to follow Chris's order, and instead doing her own thing, and even deciding for other monsters and darkeners at times, something we only see Frisk and Chris doing. We also never get to see or hear about her parents. Maybe they've been imprisoned for being a human-monster couple, which could be considered taboo in Deltarune world. It's not like we know anything about the laws and politics in the Deltarune world. And finally, in addition to her dragon-like features, she also has a very humanoid appearance, like her body proportions and her brown hair. But this argument is pretty weak, considering there are a lot of humanoid monsters such as Bratty, Noelle, and her cousin, Rory Knight. With everything said beforehand, Susie being half human does sound like a strong possibility. Plus, it does fit Toby Fox's crazy plot twists. Susie being half human, half dragon could play a huge role in the story, especially regarding the prophecy. It did call the first hero the Cage, with human soul and parts, but they didn't rule out the possibility for human-like parts. So maybe Susie will be the soul's host in the future instead of Chris, and we'll be able to control her instead. But that's a topic for a future theory, so stay tuned. What do you think about this theory? I read every single comment, so be free to give your own points of views or theories, and maybe we could solve Deltarune's mystery together. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please consider subscribing. My goal is to one day be a massive Deltarune content creator. But first, I'm setting a smaller goal of reaching 500 subscribers before the end of the month. Expect more content from me soon, and thank you for watching.